Heretic vampires. Racismus. Every society, every ideology has a moral system. This moral system describes what is right and what is wrong. It reveals and put in place power relations, do's and don'ts, expectations, goals, what's important and what isn't, what everyone knows, the unconscious collective, and what everyone should know and remember, and what everyone should forget and don't pay attention to. Linked to this moral system, each social ideology has also a set of taboos, prohibited acts. Each social ideology is also something that perhaps can be called a demonology, that is to say, a description of a collection of characters who represents crime and challenges to the currently existing ideology. Individuals who pose threats to the ideology. These demons have to be so negatively described in order to discourage people from breaking the social taboos. This creates, as it has, cognitive dissonance. People wanting to object but being unable to due to the fear of what people around them might think, or in some instances do. The friends, the co-workers, the neighbors, the family, and so forth. What effect will this have on my career? In other words, how will that affect my economic life, and thus my social life, and the life of my family? A lot of things could go wrong when there's obviously the comfortability with being a yes-sayer, avoiding the burden of proof of providing answers and arguments, opening up for the eventual possibility of the individual wanting to debate you or being infuriated. That's why you see individuals with such a relief on their face, being able to breathe normally, being relaxed when they meet someone who aren't PC, when they disagree with the orthodoxy that is built on an emotionalist discourse lacking rationality themselves. During the Middle Ages, this demonology was almost considered a science, and there was published numerous thick and detailed books on both the demons and witches. Today, we can laugh at these books because they were so far from reality. It was books created by ideologists and or greedy and power-hungry individuals who made a fortune on the existing ideology and thus had an investment in its future continued existence. We can also shudder over them because these unrealistic books led to great suffering for the people identified as witches. Most can agree with the above description of the medieval society and its demonology. However, it's far more difficult for some to realize that the same applies to our current politically correct society. It too has a moral system, a set of taboos, and an unrealistic and untrue demonology. Our society also have a number of norms and taboos which in the sociological language could be called the sacred. Our society also has a number of demons. Some of them, these demons, are fairly timeless and have been hated for a long time in our culture, such as pedophiles and rapists. But some of these demonic characters are much more younger and is in a special relationship with the ethnomasochistic ideology. Foremost among these is the ethnomasochist demon prince, the racist, Rasisten. In fact, according to newspaper, it is more taboo and demonic to be racist than a rapist, judging by what one gets on the cover on these newspapers and what gets prioritized in the media. An example of this is when in Sweden, Arab and African kids lit on fire a building in Rosengård, Sweden, and the police called them "Oppajävla", translated "monkey fuckers", And what was most interesting and outrageous was the fact that the police called them monkey fuckers for throwing bricks and fire on the car. Not that they threw bricks or fire, or that they lit the place on fire, but that the police called them a word for doing so, nonetheless. More, a Swedish Uyghur rapper, recently confirmed this in a discussion on other things, by describing the anti-fascists as a subculture of vampire hunters, and nothing summarized the conventional image of nationalist in the text of the song called Fördomsfull, or Prejudiced. I could read the Swedish version, but I don't think I have the time, so I actually took the time to translate it. Although it does not rhyme in English, I will still read it to you. It does rhyme in Swedish, however, quite beautifully. Translated to English. Mein Kampf is my breakfast lecture. To seduce youths is one of my daily duties. Beware of my thoughts, they poison. It is I who all hate incite and promote. Foreign people I hate, of course. To see other people suffer makes me happy. I want to eradicate all kinds of people from the world, so I can go on vacation without interpreters. At breakfast I eat small children, preferably spicy good ones from Pakistan. One cannot only live on hatred, we do also need protein food. And after this delicious meal, I wash my hands in Jewish soap. After all, I'm an anti-Semite. The entire basement full of Jewish corpse. I have lampshades of Jewish skin, and Satan, he is my Lord, my God, for I am one of the darkness noble men. You know, those that in solemn marching. Yes, it is this which I supposedly am, if we are to believe what is written in the media today. And you hate me because of these creations, and then you're the one who's calling me prejudiced. There is, in other words, a picture of the nationalist in the politically corrected mind, the individual subconscious, which is rather unrealistic, but that can drive these young people, who take it seriously, to commit relatively serious violations to these, the ethnomasochistic society's vampires. After having tried to identify the ethnomasochistic worldview, it will henceforth be interesting to try to identify a specific part of its demonology, namely the image of the demon, the arch-heretic, the archdemon Lucifer himself, in short, the racist, Rasisten. We will find that the ethnomasochistic demonology has taken several of the worst elements of the Christian worldview, but without having retained many of its many better features. The alert listener will find that the coming article is built both upon Nietzsche and Foucault's genealogical method, and in the modern Satanist thoughts about Satan as a symbol of everything that is prohibited in a society. These articles will obviously not provide any definitive answers, but hopefully explore the issue of ethnomasochism and its views of nationalists from several different angles. Some of these approaches will prove useless, but some have hopefully some truth in them. To renounce the right doctrine and the guilt and debt ideology. Ethnomasochism's core ideology is the religious belief in the white race's historical debt or guilt, which is seen as so obvious that it is morally suspect even to questioning it. If this is the essence of the pure doctrine, the groups and individuals surrounds it is going to appear incomprehensible and complex. They will in short be our time's heretics. It must be the opposite of myself, and we all know that only evil and good exist. Since I'm good, they're evil. This is known as dualism, and is a perspective of the Christian worldview. Here's an excerpt from an older article on dualism and moralism. Dualism and moralism. The modern era is characterized not least of the dualistic way of thinking, the dualistic mindset. Things are either good or evil, and if it's evil, it's going to have to be fought, the axis of evil, etc. This is a thinking that is alien to both traditional paganism and modern philosophy. The pagan thinking instead felt that there were several different divisions such as beauty and ugliness, strong and weak. etc. We recognize that with, for an example, Carl Schmitt, who distinguishes between the political distinction friend and enemy and the moral distinction good and evil. To get beyond the dualistic thinking would be of significant importance in order to see reality more as it really is. To use a popular cultural example, only the Sith think in absolutes, so to speak, although our contemporaries are more conformed apathic than Sith lords. Linked to duality is moralism, which identifies a large number of documents, symbols, words, and so forth as in themselves being evil. The idea of this is not that one go about and show off these behaviors, but to recognize that it depends on who does it, why, in what mood, in what context. Oftentimes, however, there are good reasons as to why they've been labeled and described as evil and banned by various characters. One can, for example, take the use of drugs. There's an obvious difference between a shaman who uses drugs for religious reasons and a drunken loser who drinks up his family's money. With hatred as a motivation. Ethnomasochism has a difficult time explaining why someone might want to have nothing to do with the doctrine of white's debt and guilt. That it could be due to the opinion that it is incorrect, or that one have an alternative worldview is to the ethnomasochist a long-sought explanation. The two main explanations are left: hatred and stupidity. Whites are either corny, or they're stupid, or evil. Those who do not submit to the ethnomasochist world and history perspective is therefore considered to base this choice because of hatred, or in some cases stupidity. The accuracy of ethnomasochism is therefore never questioned, but it is the choice of the heretic which is seen as incomprehensible and incorrect. There is no self-criticism. Any rational discussion regarding this choice is never made, since the sacred, by definition, is pre-rational. The suspicious hermeneutic disguised heretics in the mansions and the cottages. Since it is hate that is considered to be the main source of what drives those who do not subordinate themselves to ethnomasochism, and it becomes difficult to distinguish between different types of challengers against it, the main difference then becomes how well they manage to hide their real motivation, the hatred. This explains their attitude toward such mild groups as culturalists, or anti-illegal immigrationists, or immigration opponents. The ethnomasochist is convinced that they are operated by hatred regardless of what they say, regardless of their sophisticated and well thought out arguments, and the main objective then has thus become not to listen to them, not to listen to what they are saying, but to, blinded by conviction and belief, find their true hatred. Who is really the conspiracy nut here, seeking simple answers to complex problems, reducing their opposition, and describing their aim as simplistic hatred? Two quotes come to mind. Convictions are more dangerous enemies of truth than lies. Nietzsche. The worst readers are those who behave like plundering troops, to take away a few things they can use, dirty and confounded the remainder, and revile the whole. Nietzsche. Fallen angels. While the ethnomasochistic world perspective preach white's historical depth and guilt, and thus moral inferiority, there is also an unspoken element of the white superiority. Whites has historically been the driving and active race in the ethnomasochistic worldview, and it is the white who has been given the task to correct historical injustices. Colored races are thus selected by whites to be protected by white guardian angels, the colored races being without any real ability to do anything without the guardian angels lending them a hand, without the white man lending them a hand because they can't make it on their own. It thus must take a white man. These men are the guardian angels. This means that with a little goodwill we can trace elements of the myth of the fallen angels in the ethnomasochistic perception of nationalist or racists. It is members of a superior race that chooses to turn ethnomasochism back, which may explain some of the dismay the ethnomasochists feel towards such persons.